ALS is one of those diseases most of us think we understand. That is, until it shows up in your life. May is National ALS Awareness Month, and here on Wondercast, we're dedicating both episodes this month to families and clinicians walking alongside this illness every day. Welcome to Wondercast, a community collaborative podcast supporting families navigating the complexities of chronic illness or injury. Wondercast is supported by the generous sponsorship of Texas Oncology. Texas Oncology, more breakthroughs, more victories, experts in cancer care. In today's episode, we're sitting with a young family navigating ALS in real time, raising two small children, redefining normal, and finding strength in places they never expected. This conversation is about love, grief, resilience, and what it really looks like to keep living fully in the face of the unknown. Meet Christina.
Hi, my name's Christina Dirienzo Martelan. I'm a native Texan, but I spent several years in Colorado and consider that my second home. I'm a yoga instructor. I love spending time on the rivers here in New Braunfels, Texas. I'm a small business owner, mother to two beautiful kiddos, a daughter who is 4, a son who is 2, and wife to my husband of almost 9 years, Brian, who is living with ALS.
Would love if you're comfortable for listeners who may be new to ALS, if you can share a little bit about Brian's diagnosis and what steps led to that and what that moment kind of looked like for your family.
Yeah. So ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. I can't believe I can actually pronounce all this now. When I first read it, I was like, wait, what does he have? So in the U.S. is known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And it's a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. And the average lifespan from symptom onset on average is 2 to 5 years. That does vary. And it's terminal. There is no cure. So there's progressive muscle weakness or paralysis, typically begins in one of the limbs or in the bulbar region, so like speech and swallowing. And it makes its way around the body until finally affecting the diaphragm and resulting in respiratory failure, which is the cause of about 85% of ALS-related deaths. A lot of people associate ALS with the Ice Bucket Challenge, or most recently, Eric Dane, who passed away from it, actor Eric Dane. And yeah, our path to this diagnosis was not direct, which I've come to learn is pretty common with people who have ALS. Brian and I were very active, ran all the time. As I said, I teach yoga. So he was one of my best back row student. He was like in almost every single class in that back corner. And we are avid snow skiers. So we're very active. And our first signs of it, actually, our daughter was about 6 months old at the time. And we were running a Jingle Bell 5K run here in New Braunfels. And I have her in the jogging stroller and we're running along. And he's like, something is just up with my right leg. Like, it's not communicating with the rest of my body. I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, maybe you slept weird, And so we were like, okay, well, we'll just walk the rest of this race. So we did that. And then we got home and he kind of kept talking about, he's like, this is just wonky. Like I'm kind of tripping over my right leg and it's just something feels so off about it. And so he went to his PCP and his PCP realized that he had an absence of reflexes. So absolutely no reflexes when he did the little taps on his knee and elbows. And he's like, this is actually a neurology issue. I'd like for you to go see a neurologist. So went to go see a neurologist in San Antonio and we were a bit dismissed. I remember asking him and I was like, what if this is ALS? And by this point, by the time we got in with the neurologist, he was walking with a full-on gait.
That's what I was wondering. How long was that PCP appointment to the neurology visit? Was it a couple of weeks or?
Oh, it was probably a few months, I would say. Yeah. And I remember bringing up, is there any chance this is ALS? And the doctor kind of laughed a little bit and he was like, oh no, that is worst case scenario. Let's not even let our minds go there right now. And I'm like, okay. And so he suggested do PT, revisit. I think it's one of those things we really wanted PT to be the solution. We didn't want this to be some sort of a neurological disorder. worked his butt off in PT. So he like kind of had some strength back, and then we'd revisit and he's like, I think it might be working. He's like, well, let's just keep doing that and I'll see you in 6 months. And I'm like, no, there's something wrong here. Like he doesn't have reflexes. This is strange. Got in with a different neurologist in New Braunfels, and he was diagnosed eventually with something called CIDP, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, and it's autoimmune in nature. So it still affects the nerves, but there are treatment options available. At this point, I was actually pregnant with our son. And prior to getting pregnant with our son, I was like, maybe this is just a pinched nerve. Like you're thinking best case scenario. And we were just a little bit naive about it and seeing a chiropractor. And, maybe this all is just kind of like we're blowing this out of proportion. And then when I was pregnant with our son is when things started getting really serious. And Brian started falling a lot, tripping over himself a lot. He broke a number of fingers. Like we became kind of frequent visitors to the urgent care because he would like cut himself while cooking, and he's very handy. So he would accidentally maybe hit himself with the hammer and end up with stitches. And all of this is going on. And at that point, the doctor in New Braunfels was our neurologist. And eventually he was diagnosed with CIDP. So we were like, this is great news because at least it's not ALS and there's treatment options available. I actually was induced with our son in September of 2023. And I remember Brian fell in the parking lot of the hospital on our way in to give birth.
Was he able to help get himself up at that time or no?
He could I would as long as I was like sturdy with the support, he could use my arms to pull himself up to standing.
It's not like you were in labor.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah. 9 months pregnant. And that was something that was also just really crazy. And that was really hard during that time of being pregnant there was a reality that this was something that was very serious. This wasn't just like a pinched nerve situation. Like my husband was very actively involved in raising our daughter. And so there was a point when I became the one who had to carry her because his balance became very off. So I was like 9 months pregnant as the one carrying our like screaming toddler through a building, Or I remember she had a little situation where she needed to take a break from the group. Somebody called a timeout, but it was like, I can't handle, like I'll fall if I try to pick her up right now. So then, and really ever since then, I've been the one to intervene physically with our kids. But okay, so he was diagnosed with CIDP. We're like, this is fantastic news because at least it's treatable. He was approved for IVIG treatments. And so he was doing those infusions once a month, which were very expensive and also very just taxing on his body. He would do those for like 2 to 3 days, and then he would be out for the next like 2 to 3 days just in bed because it was like so exhausting on him. And he wasn't getting any better. And so that was something with the infusions is like, they're like, it's not going to work for the first round or the second round. Like it's going to take several rounds of these infusions for it to work. So we just kind of kept telling ourselves that maybe we just need to give this time. And he kept getting worse. And then through this progression, he was using like walking sticks to help walk at first. And then that progressed to forearm crutches, which progressed to a walker, which then progressed to a wheelchair. And so I think at this point, he was using his walker and the wheelchair at times. And he went in for a nerve conduction study with his neurologist. And the neurologist said, I'd like for you to see the ALS specialist in San Antonio. And we were like a bit terrified, but, there was no guarantee that that's what this was. And so we were upset, but, let's just see what they say. And so we went in for our appointment. So that was in December. And by the time we could get in with the specialist in San Antonio was March.
Oh my gosh.
It was St. Patrick's Day. And she spent quite a bit of time with Brian, and she came in and said, I believe you have ALS. And it was kind of like one of those situations where it's like almost cinematic. We were kind of both looking at one another and making eye contact with one another. And then you just kind of feel like your face get really hot and a big lump develop in your throat and like eyes well up with tears. And like the room seemingly kind of went silent. And then she started saying some things about a social worker would be in to visit with us soon and blah, blah. Like it all, like looking back on it, it just kind of like a Peanuts moment, you're like, wah, 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 wah. And we're just looking at each other, like kind of nodding our heads a little bit, but indirectly speaking with one another of like non-verbally Like, we're going to get through this. This is okay. And I'm here for you. So the social worker came in and gave us a folder with like big red letters on it that said ALS Association. And it all just happened really fast. And she was like, his doctor wants to run some additional tests just to be sure, but, start familiarizing ourselves with these different things. And because of his IVIG treatment, which is IVIG is made from immunoglobulin, which they take from plasma donations, you're getting all sorts of antibodies from all these different donors. And it was causing things to show up weird on his labs.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah. So things were popping on the labs that were maybe a little bit like Sjogren's popped, which is an autoimmune disorder that typically like complements other autoimmune disorders. And so she's like, but this is popping up. And so I want to run these additional tests. It still wasn't quite certain. There was still just like a little bit of hope that maybe this wasn't ALS. In the process of waiting to get in for all the tests in San Antonio that they wanted to run to solidify this diagnosis, we came off the wait list at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which we had been on for a while. We contacted his doctor and she was like, oh, if you have an opportunity to go to Mayo, take it. So we did that and we were there for a week. And that was a whole experience that we could...
I can only imagine.
Yeah. But we met with a neurologist there and she spent a ton of time with us and he went through a whole week of testing while we're there. I'm like, they have access to find all sorts of different disorders that, other places might not have access to. Maybe he has something just insanely rare that we're going to find the perfect cure for. Thursday evening, we were there for a week. Thursday evening, she came in and said, this is ALS. And then Friday morning, we were having an additional meeting there with like a nurse social worker as to next steps forward. So, yeah, it was not a direct journey. And
what sounds extra scary, I think, when you're looking at a disease like ALS, is that you hear that 2 to 5 prognosis and you think, well, it took us 6 months to get in. Like that clock has already started ticking. That's what we've heard from other families. Did that reality play into your mind or were you just not able to go there?
It did. His variant, he has like progressive muscle atrophy. It's a variant, and the prognosis is a little bit longer than the 2 to 5 years. So it's more like a 5 to 10 year. And we haven't asked that question on if they think that he's on the lower end of that. We're already almost 5 years into this, or on the higher end of that. I think where I do have issues, and depending on the day when you talk to me about it, I may give you a different answer, but it's very much a double-edged sword because I think in those years in which we were waiting to get in and get the appropriate diagnosis and waiting for appointments, like in a way, we were shielded emotionally during that time from the reality of the situation and the magnitude of what we were dealing with. And so in that way, I look back and I'm like, would I have wanted to know during that time? Would I have wanted to go into labor knowing that my husband has ALS and has a terminal illness? Or was it worth it not necessarily having full access to that information and really protecting my heart during that time? But also the double-edged sword is that during that time, one, we spent a ton of money treating a disease that he didn't actually have. And then as well, a lot of clinical trials, in order to qualify for them, they require that symptom onset be within the past 24 months. And so that's the other thing. And that's kind of your best bet of treating this disease right now is getting in with a clinical trial. And so that is where I experience a lot of frustration, is that in that way, I wish we would have known sooner.
I didn't even think about that. But I mean, you can't control that. You had no control over the timing. But it's just...
Right.
God, that's so hard. I know that ALS can feel like a very unfamiliar diagnosis. And I listened to you talk and you sound like such an expert, which it's a testament to the way that you are showing up and living this illness right alongside Brian, right? Like you know all the words and know all the variants and know all the things. This is your everyday. But for those that may not be familiar and are just kind of hearing about this, or maybe they know about it vaguely and they're like, I don't want that. That sounds so scary. What would you say has been the most surprising or unexpected part of this journey to where y'all are right now?
I think that we are very much of the mindset that knowledge is power. And so we want to know as much as we can know. And we want all the information that we can get. And there just isn't a ton of it out there. And so it is still quite unfamiliar. I think, though, that what has been very surprising is that there's this like very wonderful community of people who are actively advocating for this disease. we were put in touch with the ALS Association, and they've been wonderful, but we've been introduced to other organizations as well who are there with like open arms and want to just like help us through this and help educate us or help support us with medical equipment or anything in any way. And so if anybody is overly scared about this disease, it is scary and it is really hard, but there is a big support system.
Are there any groups that you have really felt have been a huge support for your family?
Yes, absolutely. So Team Gleason is one that was founded by Steve Gleason. He is a former Saints player who is living with ALS, and he and his family started that. They've been huge just with medical equipment, education, all sorts of stuff. There's another one called Live Like Lou with the namesake Lou Gehrig, and they do a lot to help. There's another one called the Chris Apple Foundation. They help with wheelchair accessible vehicles, which is obviously a very heavy expense to take on. And Wonders and Worries has been huge for us, which I know we'll probably get to more, but Wonders and Worries, Inheritance of Hope has been huge. And Hope Loves Company is one that we have our daughter going to a camp soon for kids who are affected by ALS.
We're real excited about them. They're going to be our other featured guest for this, for the second part of this month. So
yeah. They have a camp coming up in Texas. I was so excited to see that they have one coming up nearby.
Yes, I think it's so wonderful. You do have two still very young children, and I know that all the time as a child life specialist, my entire career of 20 plus years talking with families about illness, the biggest stressor that families share with us is their concern about sharing too much with their children or worry about burdening their children with either their child's illness or their illness or another parent's illness. How have you begun? Because this has been a part of, for your son, his entire life. If you're going into labor and this is already happening, but even your daughter, so young into the diagnosis, how do you feel like they understand what's happening with their dad in ways that feel age appropriate?
I think it was tough for us, and I'm sure a lot of people whose cancer diagnosis evolves over time can relate. Communication and message was like a little bit muddied there in the beginning because we did think that this was treatable. So when she would voice things, like she has memories of Brian walking and dancing with her. And so when she would voice things that she wishes daddy could walk or she wishes daddy could help her on the monkey bars, we would say things like, we're trying, babe, we got to be patient. We got to let the medicine do its job kind of thing. And then once we got the diagnosis and she would say something and I sat down with her and said, daddy's legs are probably not going to work again. This is something Wonders and Worries has been so huge for our family in helping to walk us through that. I think just really making sure that she knows that we can be the safe place for her to come and ask questions. And she asks a lot of questions. That's what's tough, I think, for me as a parent is it's hard for me to see her hurt and you want to protect her and you want to keep them away because this is it's out of all of our control, but especially their control. And you want to protect them from this, but this is our reality and it's right in front of us on the daily. And so to be there to answer her questions on repeat, why daddy's legs don't work, and keeping it very simplified that he has a disease and the communications are getting lost from his brain to other parts of his body and they're not able to move. And I don't think we're ready yet to have any sort of a terminal conversation with them about that. But I think, and this is something she did with Leah at Wonders and Worries, is I'm learning more about the way in which she prefers to receive information. And I've learned she's a very visual learner. And so she and Leah worked on this diagram of Brian. And so it's 2 feet tall. It's just a paper cutout. Our daughter colored him to look like him. And they bring me in the room to show me what they had worked on during that session. And she's like, look, Mom, this is what's going on with Dad. She's informing me. And I'm like, what's going on with Dad, girl? And she's like, this is his brain up here. And then they'd cut out pieces of yarn and then they'd chopped a straw into little bits. She's like, these little pieces of straw, these are the messages from his brain trying to get to different parts of the body. And this is what happens when it's trying to get to his legs. And she moves it really, really slow or it stops. And then his arms are still functioning. They're very weak, but they're still mobile. And so she's like, and this is what happens when the messages are going to his arms and it moves a lot faster. And I was like, what a genius way to explain this to a child. This is so fantastic. I was like, can we keep this around the house to like educate our visitors on this? This is wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think just flexing with them and learning what she wants to talk about, making sure that she knows that we are here for them along the way. Our son hasn't really asked too many questions. He's just like, Dada, wheelchair, Dada, but normalizing it and reminding her that the things that have changed, yes, Daddy can no longer run with you. But you know what we can do? We can do this. And let's circle back to the ways we are still going to operate and have fun together as a family, and that our love for her never changes at all.
Mhm.
Obviously, we love our son too. It's just he doesn't come with us to us with the questions that our daughter does.
And he very likely will. And that's the thing with what we try to share as child life specialists with all of our families going through any sort of chronic illness or injury is these are lifelong journeys. And so this is not a broken bone that's going to heal. This is something that will grow with your child. And so kind of what I tell families is we give them information for where they are and where they're at, knowing that that information as your daughter's awareness even grows more, right? Her questions are going to become more challenging and deeper. And then we partner and help with that as well. And so I think that that's an important thing for families listening to realize. You don't have to sit down and explain that there's no cure. You don't have to go there with kids yet. You give them what they can hold and you just adjust it as they grow and as new information is needed. So right now, Brian can use his arms, but if that were to change soon, right, you now have the tools to revisit that conversation, and you have partners with Leah to help, revisit that conversation. You've done some great foundational work, and it'll be interesting to see with your son as he gets more and more words and more involvement in questions. And his approach might be totally different because one, he's a totally different learner. But second of all, he has no memories of Daddy walking, running. Right. So the wheelchair for him is as normalized as a pair of glasses are. It's just always been a part of his body and his mind. So it'll be interesting to see what unique things that he has. And he will, because he's his own little tiny human. You're doing an incredible job. I know that you know this, and I'm a stranger, but I can tell the advocacy and the way that you are really meeting them where they are. It's a beautiful thing to see because you're also having to take on new roles that it's hard when it's not shared in some ways physically. That's a lot to take on.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you saying that because even though I do know it, it still feels really good to hear it because there are days where you start to doubt yourself when you're having a hard day or, your kids are being absolute crazy, but it's tough. I think that, it's tough to manage all of these different hats. And you want to sometimes with young children, especially, they're still doing things that are very age appropriate. So my husband and I, we have fully developed brains. We know we are able to be more selective with knowing that this is terminal. We can be more selective with where we're extending our energy during the day. And you know what? This argument is not worth it. This isn't going to produce anything positive. But yet you have our daughter's almost 5 and then a 2.5-year-old who are doing very age appropriate things and tantrums. And you want to just grab them so hard and be like, don't you understand? We might never get this opportunity again with your dad. Or don't you understand? We don't know what what tomorrow even holds for us. Can you please just enjoy today? So navigating that can be really tough, letting them be their own tiny humans amongst all this.
Talking about hard days, because I think that the role of the partner to somebody living with ALS, I think is a very unique role. And I think it's one that also sounds very scary because you see this person who's always been this one way to suddenly not be able to do these activities that you've shared. How do you find strength in those hard days? What has been helpful for you?
It's interesting. I look back I remember early on when he first started having these symptoms and, I was pregnant and, he started falling and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do if this ends up being ALS. I just can't even imagine that being our family dynamic. This is I can't believe this is even happening. And here I am. And, some days are harder than others, but I think that we're all so much stronger than we realize that we are. The strength that I've tapped into is something I just didn't even realize that I had within me. And I think that part of what keeps me going at the end of every day and during the day is how much I love my family and the love that I have for my family. And that is really my fuel to keep going. And the love they share back with me too is just extremely strong. I have friends who are like, do you just want to get away for a little bit? I'm like, yes, I do just want to get away for a little bit. But I love my family. I'm not going to leave them and I'm here for them through this. I think also too is like when I feel my strongest is when I'm emotionally regulated. And it kind of ties back to the same things that are seemingly so simple that we cover with our children during this is like recognizing your emotions and tuning into your body and recognizing when you're starting to feel a certain way and adjusting things accordingly. Like it is hard to be emotionally regulated, especially during times like this when there's so much going on around you. It's a lot easier to scream in situations when you're feeling overwhelmed, but to recognize when you're starting to feel a certain way and into it's kind of like, what is it? The little bags that the kiddos take home that have their, like a coping kit, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So like, what is my own coping kit and things I need to do when I feel myself starting to stray away from feeling centered? And so yeah, I would say, the love for my family gives me a lot of strength, and I feel strongest when I'm emotionally regulated, which is really, really hard, but it's something to work on every single day.
For somebody like Brian, when he is one way and starting to lose these abilities, how have you found yourself as his partner trying to support that autonomy? Because I'm sure he's losing a lot of his physical autonomy. How are you helping to encourage his verbal or emotional or any sort of that autonomy? Do you feel like that's your role, or do you feel like he's getting that from his own therapeutic support, or how does that look for y'all?
I have found a really fabulous therapist, and she has welcomed Brian to come in. He's gone to like one session with me. I think it's a lot of being his cheerleader during this and encouraging him and reminding him that this doesn't change who he is inside. And so, it does affect things like intimacy, and it does affect dynamics within our relationship. And if I do sense that he is like starting to feel a little bit down or depressed, then reminding him that he's still the man that I fell in love with. Yeah, his abilities, physical abilities are different. His mind is still there. He's still incredibly witty and hilarious and sharp. And those are like the top qualities I fell in love with, and encouraging him to he's had a lot of people during this time that have reached out and reconnected with him that I think is really cool and telling to the person that he is. Like if he was a jerk in high school, he wouldn't have friends from high school reaching out who he hasn't talked to in years that want to maintain a friendship with him and help support him and build him up in that way. That is like a work in progress, and keeping our communication open on when he's feeling a certain way or when I notice him feeling a certain way, and helping to encourage him to just know how wonderful he is and how much we love him and how capable he is. Our kids absolutely adore him. They climb on his lap and they want to be scooted around in the power wheelchair, and they think it's like a fun ride or something.
Of course. Their dad has the coolest wheels ever.
Yeah, I think it is tough though, because there are things that can help you adapt to physical limitations. So like when he stopped being able to carry his water bottle around, we got like a strap that he can like wear over his shoulder around his neck so that it's like right there with him and he doesn't have to physically hold it up with his arm. Obviously like a power wheelchair when he stops walking, but yeah, some of those different limitations and different abilities that you can't necessarily see, and how to remedy that is tough.
What do you wish that more people who might be listening understood about supporting families who have an ALS diagnosis in their family?
I think that we just want to be normal. We just want to be a normal family, and we are a normal family. If we were given one wish, it wouldn't be anything extravagant. It would just be obviously we would wish this disease away, but just to have our normal lives back. And so what can you do to help that family maintain their normal? For us, we would have our days of rest, but we love getting out and we love going places and listening to live music and going on like road trips and stuff. So what can you do to help that family reconnect with what normalcy looks like to them or what they desire it to look like? It's really hard to do all of this on our own. And I've gotten so much better about reaching out and asking for help and accepting help. But to be a caregiver for a grown man who has ALS and two small children and maintain a home and run a small business is just, it's a lot of work.
When people hear something that sounds outwardly as scary as ALS, right? We're all getting that initial gut punch, right? Hearing ALS, something you've been living with that now you're like, yes, but this is who we are and we're still who we are. I think well-wishers and people that really do want to help want to come in and say, oh, well, I'll take your kid to the baseball game, or let me do that for you. You stay home this weekend and just relax in your house. But for your family, getting out and going to do things, that's your life force. And so what you're really doing by trying to be helpful is taking away something that feels enjoyable and their autonomy and who they were before. So I think that you're so wise to share. Find ways for this family to flourish in something that feels familiar, maybe isn't about disease. Sitting at home and waiting for this disease to progress is not going to be your story.
Right. I know it's complicated. Like, I know that it's really complex and difficult to be in our circle right now because we are grieving. And as I've learned, grief isn't linear. So there are some weeks in which I am functioning quite well and quite productively. And then there's other weeks that I'm just not. And I'm crying, and it's really tough. And so I think, adapting to that with the family meeting is where we're at. I think it's tough because there will be people in which I speak to them and they're like, you just seem to be, I didn't realize you needed this help because you just seem to be doing so well. And I'm like, maybe I was that day, but that was a moment in time. And grief is really difficult.
If you could go back into the early moments of diagnosis, what would you tell yourself?
To breathe. And one of my favorite quotes is that the sun is always shining above the clouds. And that's, I think, really difficult to remember during those really cloudy times. Eventually, the clouds do part and you'll see that sunshine come upon your lives. And, it was very, very scary. I had one friend growing up whose dad had ALS, and that was the extent of my exposure to it. So it felt like very isolating, very, very confusing, but that there is a community out there. None of us signed up to be in that club, but the club is full of some really fantastic people who are ready to support.
So despite how difficult some days are, some cloudy days are, have there been any unexpected moments of connection or joy or meaning that you hold on to particularly?
I really love this question because as hard as this is and as difficult as it is, like that song, to live like you or die.
Yeah, yes.
my mind kind of goes to that because we really do God, I am just we as a family are very immersed in the present moment. And there are just moments like my daughter on the dance floor with my husband or my kids playing with him in whatever magnitude that is, or he uses a ventilator to sleep at night. And even with that ventilator, they get all snuggled up with him and have their faces right there up against his, and to just really appreciate every single moment and being totally immersed in the present moment. I think that whole tomorrow is never guaranteed for anybody. And it actually kind of drives me a little crazy when people are like, well, none of us know when our day is going to come. And I'm like, no, we don't. But this is still very hard that, you do in somewhat have a finite idea of when his life is going to end. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. It holds a different value when you're dealing with terminal illness. And another moment of joy that comes to my mind is our daughter. When the wheelchair was first introduced to our house, she had a really tough time with it, and she would kick it. She didn't want Brian sitting in it. We had a party that she was invited to, and she told him that wheelchair boys weren't allowed. And I think it was I know it's really sad and heartbreaking looking back on it, because she was just having a really difficult time with the fact that,
she was processing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then several months after that, she had drawn a picture of our family, and we were there, and she drew Brian in a wheelchair, and we all had smiles on our faces. And it was just so cute because I'm like, this is all good. This is our family, and she's accepting this. And she drew a great wheelchair too. And we're happy here. We're hanging out. We're making do. They're going to grow up with this just really cool perspective when it comes to diversity and accessibility and disabilities. And just, it's really going to shape them into being some really awesome human beings.
Some kind, resilient, empathetic.
Yes.
Gosh, I mean, I think about the core traits that every mom wants for their children. Moments like this, your children already do have that, but they are going to just grow into that even more. And I'm so thankful for you sharing your story with us today. Is there anything else that I failed to mention or anything that you want to share that didn't get to share? Or do you feel like we've done it justice?
I think we've done it justice. Like, they're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Brian certainly is going to be okay. You know, I kind of touched on it earlier, but that you're stronger than you realize, and you're going to tap into this strength that you just didn't even realize that you possess.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast today. Please subscribe and continue to check back as our content is ever evolving. For questions or specific content-related requests, please send an email to podcast@wondersandworries.org.